What is a crisis? A crisis is a situation that causes significant emotional or cognitive stress. Today, we're going to be talking about 4 different types of crises that you might see when working with a mother in crisis. One of those is an acute crisis. An acute crisis is a sudden and overwhelming mental health emergency where emotions or stress have become unbearable. Example: a mother who just lost her job and is being evicted feels completely hopeless and cannot stop crying and has thoughts of giving up. Another crisis that you might run into is a slow burn crisis. This is described as a stressful situation that builds up over time, showing warning signs before things spiral out of control. An example of this would be a mother who has been juggling multiple jobs, barely sleeping, and skipping meals starts to feel constantly exhausted and emotionally drained, eventually breaking down. The next crisis that you might encounter is an anxiety crisis, a moment of extreme stress or panic that makes it hard to think clearly and causes physical symptoms such as shaking, sweating, or shortness of breath. An example of this would be a mother who's struggling to pay rent receives a final shutoff notice for her electricity, and her heart starts racing, her hands starts to shake, and she feels like she can't breathe. Finally, another crisis that you might encounter is a sudden crisis. A sudden crisis is a critical situation where harm has already occurred and will get worse without immediate help or intervention. An example of this would be a mother with no childcare, no support, has to leave her kids alone to go to work, and now Child Protective Services are investigating her. Understanding crisis through the neurobiological lens. The arousal continuum describes the range of psychological and emotional states that a person can experience, from calm and relaxed to extreme panic or shutdown. This range directly impacts how the brain processes information, makes decisions, and even responds to threats. Imagine a mother facing eviction with nowhere to go. At first, she may enter a low arousal state where she feels emotionally numb, tired, and detached. This is the hypoarousal zone. In the brain, the prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning and decision making, goes offline, while the dorsal vagus system dominates, creating a state of immobilization or freeze. She may appear unmotivated, but her nervous system is actually overwhelmed and shut down. As stress builds, she begins to grasp the severity of the situation. She might shift to her optimal arousal zone, often referred to as the window of tolerance. And this is where we want to be, guys. The prefrontal cortex is active and communicating well with the amygdala. The amygdala is the emotional processing center. Here, she is able to think clearly, weigh options, problem solve, and seek support. This is the zone where healing and connection are most possible. However, if stress continues to escalate, she is denied housing or has no safe place for her children, she may shift into a hyperarousal. In this state, the amygdala hijacks the brain, flooding her system with cortisol and adrenaline. Her heart races, thoughts speed up, and she might feel panicked, irritable, or angry. The prefrontal cortex begins to shut down, making rational thinking difficult. Her brain is now in fight or flight mode, trying to survive the perceived threat. If the crisis continues with no resolution or support, she may cycle back into hypoarousal, a state of shutdown. At this point, her nervous system is exhausted, and the brainstem takes over, prioritizing basic survival. She may seem disengaged, flat, or not present, but she is actually in a protective freeze response, trying to survive overwhelming circumstances. Understanding the arousal continuum and how it affects the brain allows providers and volunteers to recognize when a mother is dysregulated, not as a failure of willpower or motivation, but as a nervous system response to trauma. When this awareness, we can respond with compassion and help her co-regulate and gently guide her back into her window of tolerance, where true support and empowerment are possible. So let's talk about this window of tolerance. Imagine your emotions and your nervous system as a window, a space where you feel most able to manage life. Inside that window, you can think clearly, respond calmly, and make decisions, take care of others and yourself. You're not stress free, but you're able to function. That is your window of tolerance. But when life gets overwhelming, maybe you're facing housing insecurity, a breakup, postpartum challenges, court involvement, financial pressure, or just feeling alone, that window can shrink. And when we're pushed above that window, we go into what's called a hyper arousal state. This can look like feeling anxious or panic, yelling, snapping easily, feeling like you need to fix everything right now, racing thoughts, trouble sleeping, or being on edge. On the other hand, when we go below that window, we drop down into what is called a hypoarousal state, where we kind of just shut down. This might look like feeling numb or disconnected, sleeping a lot, feeling like you can't get out of bed, struggling to care about anything, feeling like you're failing, or like everything is just too much. Both of these states are natural. This is your body's way of protecting you and saying, this is too much. And for mothers in crisis, it can feel like you're bouncing between these extremes every day. But here's the good news. Your window can grow again. With support, safety, rest, and the tools to regulate your nervous system, like breathing, grounding, asking for help, even stepping outside, we can stretch that window back out. We can open it up. And that gives you more space to respond, not to react, to parent with presence, to breathe. So if you feel like you find yourself yelling one moment and totally shut down the next, you're not broken. You're just outside of your window, and that's okay. We're going to work on building the tools to bring you back in and also teach you how to increase your window of tolerance. We all yearn for connection. One of the ways that we connect is through communication. There are several types of communication. One of those is verbal communication, which is what I'm doing right now. Verbal communication is clearly expressing ideas, thoughts, feelings through spoken words. Calmly explaining your perspective during a disagreement. The second is nonverbal communication. And nonverbal communication includes body language, gestures, postures, eye contact, and facial expressions. That would look like this. I'm not using my words, but I'm using my body language. Nonverbal cues often reveal feelings that go beyond words. Crossing arms may indicate defensiveness, while open gestures can indicate receptiveness. Example, nodding during a conversation shows understanding and engagement. The next is written communication, which you probably do every day through text message or email. Written communication is emails, text messages, and letters. Example, texting to convey your feelings, thoughts, or instructions. In order to be the best communicators that we can be, we have to know how to listen. So we want to be able to apply active listening. Give our full attention without interruption. Use compassionate, non-judgment language. Recognize nonverbal and verbal cues. Offer choices rather than directives. And recognize and reinforce their strengths. In order to be the best communicators we can be, we want to apply active listening techniques and validation to foster trust and open dialogue. We want to use statements like, I hear you, that sounds really challenging, and how can I support you? Giving our full attention without interrupting. Use compassionate, non-judgmental language to provide emotional support. Recognize nonverbal and verbal cues that indicate distress or urgent needs. Offer choices rather than directives. Remember, we want to empower our clients. And so that could look like, would you prefer to talk about housing first or focus on financial planning? Recognize and reinforcing their strengths by stating simple things like, hey, you've already taken the steps towards stability, and that's really courageous. We want to acknowledge those things. Okay, guys?